Aloha. Welcome to American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and today's title is Trump's Power Play. Who's applying the brakes? Abuse of presidential power surges. It's been a very, very busy year for Donald Trump, and it seems like in the last 4 months, he's employed a lot of initiatives that aren't sitting well with a lot of Americans. Not to go in any particular order, but he's done the following. He's directing the Department of Justice to file criminal charges against the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell. God knows why, because he doesn't like the interest rates. So he thought he tried to investigate him, maybe for cost overruns. He's also he's done an unauthorized invasion of Venezuela. He's literally taken the president of Venezuela, whether we like him or not, President Nicolas Maduro, and he has captured him and he's imprisoned him. He's taken over oil production, or he's going to be taking over oil production without any authorization from Congress. He literally, at the direction of Pete Hegseth, has killed several Venezuelans, and they've been killed, and there's really no evidence of criminal involvement yet. They're suspected, but there's no evidence. He is threatening Iran to bomb them if the protesters are harmed or murdered, but that's already taken place. Many protesters have been killed in the streets. And last but not least, he's authorized ICE to go in there and very brutally try to do their job, but in a brutal, horrific manner, which led to the death of one of the citizens of Minneapolis, Renee Good. So these are just a few things that we have witnessed in the very short months. And the question is, how does this end? Who's applying the brakes? Or is there any brakes? Certainly isn't Congress. We've got a few people that are grousing, but we've heard that before. And there's nothing new about that. So who's applying the brakes? And that's one of the things we're going to tackle today. And with me to tackle this, we have Jay Fidell, CEO of ThinkTech Hawaii. We have Chuck Crumpton, mediator extraordinaire and decades as a mediator. Ben Davis, recent resident of Canada, Quebec. And we have David Larson, law professor at Mitchell Hanlon. Welcome, everyone. Good to see everyone. It's been a busy the last few months, and it's great to see you in the new year.
Great to see you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year,
everyone. Yeah. Hey, all right. So let's get to it, guys. Jay, I'm going to go right to you. The Trump administration has been extremely busy, as I said in the introduction. They've implemented a lot of executive orders, and to some degree, these executive orders don't exactly appear to be legal. What's your read on the most aggressive things Trump has done? Of all the things that I'm listed here in the introduction, what do you find to be the most egregious and perhaps most unlawful?
That's a hard question because they're all unlawful, everything you've mentioned, and they're all egregious. But the one that bothers me most is the assassination, the killing of Renee Good on her wife. And now there's an investigation going on about her wife. So, all in all, I mean, that one is just outrageous beyond outrageous beyond outrageous. And it leads to, of course, a protest in the street, and he's treating the protests as illegal, and he's detaining a lot of people. And I say he because it really is he, isn't it? You can't say, oh, it's Kristi Noem or it's Kash Patel. It's him. He's the one.
Do we know that for a fact, that he's got a direct line and saying, this is how I want you to do it, and do this and do it this way? Isn't there some insulation there?
In my view, no. He's responsible completely. And furthermore, that if he wasn't responsible at the inception, he's the president. He could say, cut it out. He doesn't say, cut it out. So it has a life of its own, but it's all him. You guys may not feel as strongly as I do about it, but I feel that it's all him. Everything you've mentioned is all him. And he has these loyalists between him and these horrible events, who are taking instructions from him.
Well, okay. while we're on the topic of Renee Good, I knew we were going to get to it. I just didn't know when in the show we'd get to it. I want to cut to Mr. Larson. David, you live there. Please tell me what you've witnessed on a local level and what your thoughts are about this brutalization of people in the streets. Citizens, U.S. citizens are being brutalized. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning. And it's not getting any better. We now have 3,000 ICE agents in the Twin Cities. If you look at the Minneapolis police force, it's under 600. So we have 5 times as many ICE agents now on site than we do in local law enforcement. So Mayor Jacob Fry has said it's invasion, and I think that probably is the accurate term. It's a federal invasion of the Twin Cities. Now, Renee Good was killed a week ago today, so it's very recent. That was about 6 miles from our home, and we're about a mile and a half as the bird flies from the Whipple Federal Building, which is the center of ICE, and we can hear. It's right on the other side of the Mississippi River from us, and we can hear the crowds out there protesting. So Minnesotans are turning out in droves to protest what's going on. But it's so distressing because when you look at the video, and there's a lot of video available of what happened the day that Renee Good was killed, it's very clear that she was trying to exit the situation. That the wheels of her SUV were turned. She goes forward, and she actually, video is very clear, smiles at Jonathan Ross, says, "I'm not mad at you, man." And seconds later, he shoots her 3 times in the head. It was just a stunning murder, basically.
Are you surprised that the Department of Justice is not going to investigate this incident? And furthermore, they are going to investigate Ms. Good's wife because she happens to be a protester.
Well, the Department of Justice is going to investigate, but unlike with George Floyd or Melissa Hardman or the Annunciation shootings with the elementary school kids, which were joint investigations from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension here in Minnesota and the FBI, they've cut the BCA out completely. They've frozen out the state of Minnesota. And they're saying that we're going to investigate this ourselves. Number one, and number two, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice is not going to do anything, even though they should be very much involved with what happened here. So they're closed off the Civil Rights Division. They've closed off the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. So today,
let me get your reaction to the fact that I believe it's 6 attorney generals have resigned as a result of the investigation of Miss Good's wife.
It's the whole justification for this invasion with ICE agents in Minnesota is the claim that there's fraud everywhere, billions and billions of dollars of fraud. That's why they're here. So Joe Thompson is the acting U.S. Attorney General, and he's a capable attorney, and he has been leading the fraud investigation. So we're starting from the idea that the reason they're here is fraud. But now Renee gets shot. They're trying to manage the investigation. Today they came out and said that Jonathan Ross has internal bleeding. Of course, nothing you can see, and no evidence shows that it was ever struck. They are ordering the prosecutors to not focus on Jonathan Ross, but focus, as Jay mentioned, on Renee Good's widow instead. The prosecutors, Joe Thompson and 5 others, have said this is insane, and they just resigned. So now what's the situation? The whole point they're here is because of fraud. Joe Thompson has been leading the investigation into the fraud. He's in control of those cases, He's very competent. He knows what's going on in those cases, and so do the other 5 prosecutors who resigned. Well, now the whole reason they're here is fraud. That investigation is being totally compromised and jeopardized by this mass resignation. It's now all about obscuring the truth of what happened with Renee Good. That's now the focus. And this whole goal of ICE being here in the first place, which is, again, supposedly fraud investigation, is at best case compromised. Worst case, it's been jeopardized.
Mhm.
So yeah, things
Okay.
are turning so badly, and it's all now a focus on basically
Do
hiding.
you agree with Jay's position that he's directly involved in this, or that there's any layers of insulation with Christy Nome and her gaggle
Yeah,
of
at this
friends?
point, it's impossible to believe that he's not directly involved. I mean, this has
Okay.
attracted so much attention. He has to be.
All right. Thank you very much, David. Hey, Ben, you're a Canadian now. You living in Quebec. What are your neighbors saying about not necessarily the good incident, or could include the good incident, the killing, the murder of Renee Good, but what are they saying about other things? Be it are threatening Denmark if Greenland is not handed over or sold to them. That might impact them. What are they saying, Ben?
Really, from the first day that I arrived here, the comment was that Trump is insane.
Okay.
I mean, that was a very common theme. Trump is insane, and America is insane right now. And there's a certain amount of sadness, okay, because at least the people I've been talking to, there's a certain amount of sadness, but there's kind of also this feeling like we've just gone completely off the rails, and as a consequence, Canada has to figure out its own way through all of these things. One of the things that I thought was interesting recently that happened is that Canada opened up a consulate in Greenland, in Nuuk, Greenland, the big
I didn't
city.
know that.
And they also opened a consulate in Alaska. Okay. Now, the idea of having a full-fledged Canadian consulate sitting there in Greenland in the context of what the Europeans are also talking about, Denmark and others about Greenland, this is a very interesting move by Canada. And I think you all are aware that Carney said fairly early on that it's over between the United States and Canada. We have to build a new situation here, and that's the feeling. It's that I hear is that it's having to build a new situation with I don't know, with a very difficult neighbor next door. You know, a very, very difficult, powerful, and with a leader that's insane next door.
Well, that's funny you should say that, because I've been saying, and and to some extent, I wonder if all things stem from some of his psychopathy issues, and whether it be his position with Venezuela, or his angst against the Danes regarding Greenland, or his immigration. It just seems to be so extreme. The way it's implemented, the way things are implemented, are so extreme that you have to wonder: is it coming from a place where he's not well?
I would like to be able to be a person to say that, but I feel kind of like, remember, what was it, 1776, George III, how we used to learn about him being in school and being insane, running England when we had our
the term was the Mad King.
The Mad King, right? I mean, that's the way. That's at least the way that I'm experiencing him. He also, I don't think there are loyalists. There are very few loyalists. I think there are lots of opportunists around him who are manipulating him. I mean, it's not hard to manipulate him, but manipulating him for their own advantage. I mean, if you want to say, okay, there's him who's behind all this, yeah, but you can feel Miller behind all this craziness. I mean, you can feel Miller everywhere. And, you can feel, sorry, I just had a call come in. You can feel Miller, not so much Hegseth. Hegseth is kind of like, he does the bidding. But it's amazing to watch the number of things that the Department of Defense is doing wrong that are so obvious to the average legal person in the military, right? I mean, the idea of a plane being used. That's a civilian plane, which is perfidy, right? In the law of war. That's not like, that's like saying, stop at stoplights. You know what I mean? It's not like rocket science stuff. Anyway, if I can just say one thing, finally, it is very disturbing to see things written like, what is it? One of yours and one of ours, all of yours, or these other kind of one country, one heritage, whatever. These very sort of echoes of the 30s kind of stuff, right? In Germany, being put out there by the administration. That I is for anybody who has kind of been worried about that. It just keeps being confirmed that you need to worry about it.
It's so funny, Ben, that you mentioned that, because Jay and I, maybe 8 years ago, we were making comparisons to the 1933 Germany of the time and making some comparisons. And I think we were labeled a little extremist. But now everyone's not thinking that's so extreme.
No. Yeah. And I'm going to second that. And if I could just say, since the question is who's going to put the brakes on it, it's from what I hear is people are kind of like, look, outside the United States, they don't really care who you voted for. Okay, this is an American problem, and you Americans got to figure it out. Whether you vote, so you can't just get away with I didn't vote for it. Sorry,
right?
That's really deep. That's really deep.
That's a great point, Ben. Thank you. I'm going to cut to Chuck here. Chuck, the Supreme Court has ruled that the National Guard must exit. They did San Francisco and Chicago. Trump, he regretfully said, okay, yeah, they're going to go. But the point is, there was someone to stop and put the brakes on the abuse of presidential power. Does the federal courts or does eventually the Supreme Court get involved on how ICE is abusing the rights of U.S. citizens? Not to mention all the immigrants and how badly how badly they're being treated, but specifically U.S. citizens are being roughed up. Do the federal courts get involved in this to put on the brakes?
Well, so far, unless I'm mistaken, Minneapolis and Minnesota are the only non-federal entities that have taken legal action directly against ICE increase involvement, insurrection, invasion, whatever you want to call it. But I think if we step back and take the points that Jay and you and Ben and David have made and look at where we are going forward, we're 9 months and change away from midterm elections that may make some difference approximately a year from now, if any. But we have, so far, unstopped by the courts, Trump completely militarizing with whichever entity he wants to use, National Guard, ICE, whoever it is, militarizing housing, militarizing education, militarizing the communities. Why would he not be in the process of setting it up to do that for the elections so that when the midterm elections come, he will have military intervention, control, suppression, intimidation operating at every blue city he possibly can?
Yeah, he pretty much admitted that the midterms are not going to go well for him. He even made a statement to all his GOP folks. He's also said, I regret not confiscating the voting machines in the 2020 election. What's your thoughts about that?
I think, again, you have to put it back into the larger picture and take into account the points that Ben and Jay and David have made, that it's a very force-oriented, power-oriented control direction and mechanism that Trump, through Miller, has been putting in place. And there's no reason not to expect that to continue and to escalate with whatever resources he's able to control. If he can't control the National Guard, he'll just keep increasing ICE. Word
Is
came
this
out today that he's using 80 million or something of the ICE budget for propaganda?
Chuck, here's a question kind of out of the blue, but here goes. We've gone through a fire hose of things that he's implementing, either part of his policy that he had planned and stated when he was elected, or things just coming out of nowhere. Many people are saying these are nothing more than distractions away from Epstein. Do you buy that all these things that he's dramatically implementing, are they his attempt to distract the media and distract the American public from his problems with Epstein?
Again, big picture perspective, among other things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most important feature of it. It is a necessary one to the extent that he has two weapons, distraction and projection.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Yep.
And if he can deflect some attention from Epstein over toward ICE's brutality, it still doesn't deter him or impede him from continuing to militarize the election process going forward. And if that's a major objective, because he's come out and stated, right, if he loses the midterm elections, if he loses the House, there will be impeachment proceedings.
You think so?
They'll be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Senate can stop him, and there are other ways to do that. But if that's a short-term objective, the militarization connection to the electoral process is the one that may be the most dangerous in the coming rest of 2026.
Before we go to final thoughts, thank you very much, Chuck. Jay, back to you. Do you think there's anyone other than the election that's in a position to put on those brakes? And I know you're not a big fan of the polling, his poll numbers, but they look pretty dismal, particularly on one of the most important parts of his promise to the Americans was an improving economy. I think it's about 33%, 34% that thinks he's doing an okay job on the economy. That's pretty low, Jay. That's about as low as they go. But I know you don't like polling. So what's your thought?
Even polling can be somehow instructive. And what really amazes me is that there's still a whole bunch of people who support him, not only on the economy, but on everything you have mentioned, all the madness. And I find that extraordinary. And so when Ben says the Canadians think the country is out of its mind, there's a valid point. And I know that because I have a friend on the other side of Canada who tells me that the Canadians think the country, the U.S., is lost. It's lost. And they don't blame only Trump. They blame the whole country. And there's some value in that. But I want to go to something that David and I have not fully agreed on, may I say. I was of the view that there would not be midterm elections. And indeed, there are rumors to the effect that Trump has got a plan to derail the midterm elections and thus leave everything in place with majorities in both houses, and he'll just continue, and they will not stop him, and they could, but they won't. And of late, though, David, I have to kind of half agree with you. I want to tell you why. I woke up this morning thinking, wait a minute, so all these people are leaving Congress, and there have to be new elections. And, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to have to be a new election, and we'll see what happens. And Republicans aren't particularly popular these days. Maybe she will lose to a Democrat. Who knows? And there are various elections going to happen and are happening in the country now. And what's going on in Congress may change. The complexion of Congress may change. On the other hand, I think Trump is watching that very carefully. And although I did believe when I said to David that there would not be midterms and that he would try to stay in office and keep them in office and do whatever he wants without midterms. Now I'm wondering this, and I'd be interested in anybody's reaction to it, is if enough people drop out of Congress by the time of the midterm elections, if Congress changes to have more Democrats, that leaves Trump with a problem. And if the country really gets irritated at him, which it should be, but I'm afraid it's not irritated enough, then maybe he's going to decide, okay, I'd better have midterms. So it's really a decision he hasn't made yet. And it may be that I'm right. I continue to think that I'm right, that he has a plan to derail the midterms. And maybe David is right, too, that the midterms will happen. He will be able to control that piece of history. And it will depend on what happens between now and next November. That's one thing I'd like to say. The other thing, now that we're into final comments, I guess, is the madness here is not just Trump. Trump has created a cabinet. And of course, Stephen Miller is a mainstay in that cabinet, who are total loyalists. And so when he makes some crazy initiative, some crazy move, they support him no matter what. Kristi Noem supports him no matter what. There's no question that he told her that they were going to deny that Renee Good was killed, and that it was her fault somehow, and that her widow was really at fault for all of this, and all kinds of lies, incredible lies. And so what you have is he comes up with this craziness. They go along with it. They follow instructions. But there's more. What I'm saying is that it's a kind of an echo chamber. And the echo chamber is sometimes they come up with crazy things too. And he follows that. So together they make a kind of collective madness. And I think that's been happening. If you appoint all these people who are total loyalists, and then they will agree with you, you will agree with them. They're together. You got to give them credit for this kind of total collaboration, except for, what's her name? Tulsi Gabbard. I don't know where she is these days. But if you have this kind of echo chamber, it makes it all the more strong. And the press, and I blame the press in so many ways, accepts it. If it isn't coming from him, it's coming from them. And you hear it over and over again. And it sounds like this has got legs that it really doesn't have. But what I'm saying is it's not just Trump. It's all the people who feed back and agree with him. And it's the people who come up with crazy things where he feeds back and agrees with them. So what we have here is a pretty good system for Trump to break everything, to ruin the country. And indeed, despite the polls, despite what's happening in the stock market, which is another show, he's still in charge. And I don't think there's any guardrails operating right now. And we can only hope there will be. But for now, it's really a very dreary picture going forward.
Not an optimistic one. Okay, Jay, thank you for your final thoughts. Ben, let's go to you for your final thoughts.
One guardrail that we should not forget are the sovereignty of the states, the state sovereignty, the dual battle of sovereignty between the federal government and the states. I think Illinois and also Minnesota have filed what I find amazingly a 10th Amendment challenge in the courts to the federal government, saying the federal government is invading. I mean, I've never seen that kind of thing in my life. And that's interesting. I mean, we'll see where that goes, but that goes right to the heart of our federalism, and that there's somebody who's willing to do that as a state is something that we should not ignore. I think personally. The second thought is that imagine if all this was happening and no one was protesting. The fact that so many people are, all kinds of people are protesting. The fact that you get to see these videos now of unbelievably brave people faced off against people standing with guns in their doorway is something that is the hope that I see. Okay. Now, the third and last point is I have to come back down to the States to pick up stuff in my storage unit down in Charlottesville. This time around, I started to ask myself, should I buy a body camera just for the trip? And that tells you just sort of how crazy it looks from up here. Not because I think anything's going to happen, but because I think that there's enough that I'm reading about, particularly about Black and brown people and the way they're being treated, that I said, maybe just for the road trip, I should go out and spend the $150 and have a body camera to take me the whole way. And that is, I want to tell you, is a pretty deep thought for me to come to. And I asked somebody about it in my family, and they're like, wow. Well, maybe if it's not too expensive. You know what I mean? I mean, they're down there. Okay? They're not, up here. They're saying, well, how much would it cost? I can see why you might want to, you know what I mean? The idea of that, folks, think about that.
Well,
like
I mean, there's a lot of people
when you Hawaiians go back to the States.
I mean, there's a lot of people that are U.S. citizens saying, I'm at a point where I have to carry a passport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's not where we want to be. All right, Ben, thank you for your final thoughts on this. Let's cut to David. David, your final thoughts.
That reference Ben made earlier, one of ours, all of yours, it kind of goes back to an incident in Germany when Czech citizens assassinated a Nazi leader, and the Nazis responded by wiping out the Czech town. A massacre basically of the town. And so to see Kristi Noem have that phrase on a lectern, which happened within the last couple of days here in the Twin Cities, one of ours, all of yours, is a chilling threat. So one thing I'm concerned about, obviously, is that we stabilize here in the Twin Cities. Ben mentioned we have federal lawsuits filed in Illinois and Minnesota against the federal government under the 10th Amendment. The judge in Minnesota ruled on that today. There was a request for a temporary injunction. Now, a temporary injunction is basically an ex parte order where one comes in and says for 10 to 21 days. I'd like to get an order just to freeze, for this to happen, because there's going to be irreparable damage if we don't act quickly. But the whole idea of a TRO is it's one party asking in an emergency situation because things are so bad. Today, the judge said, I have to wait to listen to the other side. Well, that's when you want a permanent injunction. That's not even what a temporary a TRO is, temporary restraining order. So that's just puzzling and discouraging that judge would respond like that. That I need to hear the other side, because that's not the point of a TRO. She says, but, I'm not ruling, and, I may still give you your injunction. We'll expedite it. So let's hope that happens. I still always have hope. I'm an optimist. And I think it's really critical. Thousands of people are turning out in the Twin Cities. I think we need thousands more to turn out. There's been social research that says if you get 3.5% of the population in a country that turns out, at that point, it's undeniable and the government has to respond. When the No Kings movement, we got to 7 million. We need to get to 12 million people. If we can get to 12 million people protesting, maybe we can turn things around.
Great point, David. Appreciate that. Thank you for your thoughts. Chuck, I'm going to leave the last to you. You get the final word.
Well, I agree with Ben, Jay, David, we look at and for the sources of resistance and resilience, and they are where they've identified them. There are some states and some cities that have committed themselves to be sources of resistance. They're going to stand up, just as there have been some educational institutions, some universities that have done so. There are some people and communities and groups that have committed themselves to be sources of resistance and resilience with and for each other. We're hearing some personal human interest, but encouraging stories of people standing up for each other. The people who are getting in the way of ICE, Renee Good is an example. She's not, and she was not at risk of being detained or deported as an illegal immigrant or alien or refugee. But there are many, many people like her who are standing up for the people who are at risk. And they're putting themselves at risk by doing so. And so the question that we're going to be looking at as we move not only toward the midterms, but toward a national sense of convergence or coalition is where those coalitions form, who are in them, and how committed they are to being the resistance and the resilience that will get us through this and out the other side. Because there will be another side to this.
Well, maybe that answers the question about who's applying the brakes. Maybe it's not institutions. Maybe it will be those Americans, those brave souls that actually take to the streets and speak out and voice up. Good point, Chuck. Thank you, and appreciate your final thoughts. That's it. We're run out of time. I do want to thank my special guests, Chuck Crumpton, Ben Davis, David Larson, and of course, always Jay Fidell, our CEO and co-host extraordinaire. I'm Tim Apicella. Won't you join us next week for American Issues, Take One? And until then, aloha.